It's been a wild week for the Las Vegas Raiders with all the rumors and speculation going around. The big topic right now is about Antonio Pierce's future as the team's head coach. There's been a rumor saying that his job is in serious doubt, according to NFL Network's Tom Pelissero and Ian Rappaport. They mentioned that many people in the league believe his future with the team isn't secure. However, they also said that if the Raiders win again this week, it might help Pierce keep his job. Personally, I think anyone making these kinds of decisions is not seeing the bigger picture. By now, the team should already know if they want Antonio Pierce to stay as head coach next season. The decision shouldn't depend on the results of just a few games, especially since the season is already almost over. This is one of the reasons why the Raiders are in such a messy situation right now. Players and coaches like Antonio Pierce are probably feeling the pressure, knowing their jobs might be on the line. If this rumor is true, Pierce most likely feels that uncertainty too. When your job is at risk, you can usually sense it. And if Mark Davis or Tom Telesco or whoever is making the decisions hasn't had a private conversation with Pierce to reassure him about his future with the team, that's a real problem. Antonio Pierce signed a 2-year deal last season, but when he was asked about his job security in a press conference, he simply said he's under contract for next season. That answer doesn't exactly inspire a lot of confidence. To me, just being under contract doesn't mean much. For example, Josh McDaniels was under contract when he was fired, and Jack Del Rio had just signed a 4-year extension with the Raiders, but after just 1 year, he was fired for John Gruden. So, contracts don't guarantee job security. Looking at some of the things Antonio Pierce has said in recent press conferences, especially his comments about the Raiders losing out on the #1 overall pick, it seems like he might be auditioning for other teams. He's probably just trying to make the best out of a tough situation this season. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders go out and try to win another game against the New Orleans Saints tomorrow. It's a very winnable matchup. The Saints will be without Derek Carr as quarterback, and Alvin Kamara is also out. They'll likely be playing Spencer Rattler, who had a terrible performance in his last game, scoring 0 points. So this could definitely be a game the Raiders have a good chance to win. If the Raiders win, we'd probably end up dropping lower in the NFL draft order, but we'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow. Still, this isn't the kind of news you want out there, especially at this point in the season. When there's smoke, there's fire, and it really feels like Antonio Pierce might be playing his last few games with the Raiders. It's been a strange situation all around with him. If he does get fired, I do think he's been dealt a bit of a raw deal. He might have been screwed over a little. That being said, I'll be honest, there were definitely things he could have done better as head coach. But when you hire an interim coach, you have to know there will be struggles at first. And even though there are a lot of things that make me question whether Antonio Pierce should be the long-term solution as our head coach, I do think he wasn't given a fair shot this season. He didn't have a solid quarterback to work with, and he had some really bad luck with injuries. How many players on the defensive side of the ball have been hurt? Ultimately, I think it comes down to the Raiders not doing the right things in the offseason to put the team in a good position to succeed. When you start a season with Guru and AO, with all due respect to them, it's usually a recipe for disaster. The only way I thought it might work is if we had a strong running game to carry us. We needed a strong defense and a powerful running game, but neither of those things worked out, and that's what made this season such a disaster. Ideally, I'd like to give Antonio Pierce one more season. It would need to be a make-or-break year for him, though. The team would have to address the quarterback position, and we'd need to see real progress. If not, he's probably out. But right now, it seems like there's a good chance Antonio Pierce could be gone after just one season with the Raiders. Like I said, he didn't get the best situation here, and everything around him has been pretty strange. Last season, when Antonio Pierce stepped in as the interim head coach, we also had Champ Kelly as the interim general manager. Their relationship seemed to be working well. They appeared to be on the same page. I honestly thought if Pierce got the head coach job, Champ Kelly would probably be given the GM role too. But then, we got surprised when Tom Telesco was hired as general manager. When that happens, it's usually tough for the new head coach, because typically, the GM hires their own guy. But that wasn't the case with the Raiders, and it's made this year really awkward for everyone involved. Also, it's clear that Antonio Pierce doesn't seem like the same guy he was last season. I'm not sure what's going on, But something just doesn't feel right with Antonio Pierce and the whole situation between him and the general manager. With everything going on, I really think there's a good chance Antonio Pierce won't be the head coach next season. If that happens, it's going to make for a very interesting offseason. We'll need to hire a new head coach, and that's a position we have to get right. Another thing I wanted to mention is the Max Crosby situation. He recently went on his podcast and said a few things that stood out. Here's what he had to say. It's been years of inconsistency. New coaches every other year, new teammates. There have been times when I thought, man, this D-line is cold. Then I come back and every one of them is gone. It's just been like that, on and on. It's tough, bro. My contract situation is tricky. There's no more guaranteed money. There are a lot of things that need to be talked about, and I'm looking forward to those conversations. I'm looking forward to the off-season, the process. There's so much to talk about, and it's going to be interesting. As we can see, he was talking about his own contract situation and the uncertainty around it. This whole situation ties into Max Crosby's current position with the Raiders. One thing's for sure, Max Crosby is going to want his contract renegotiated. He's going to want that guaranteed money, which is going to be another big factor in the offseason. Not only will we need to figure out the head coach position if Antonio Pierce is fired, but we also have to address Max Crosby's situation. There are also other defensive players who will need new contracts too. The Raiders have a lot of cap space, but these are all major decisions that have to be made. As for Max Crosby, do I think he could demand a trade and leave the Raiders? Honestly, I think Crosby has reached a point where, after dealing with injuries and everything else over the past few seasons, he's not going to take a pay cut this time. Last time his contract came up, he gave the Raiders a team-friendly deal, but I don't see him doing that again. The Raiders are going to have to get serious about building a real contender and a competitive roster if they want to keep him. Max Crosby's patience with the franchise is definitely wearing thin. He's getting closer to 30, and I personally feel this could be the Raiders' last chance to show him some real commitment. We need to get a quarterback and prove to him that we can truly compete for a Super Bowl. That's what a guy like Crosby wants in his career. And at this point, with the way things have been going, I wouldn't rule anything out. We all thought players like Josh Jacobs and Davante Adams wouldn't leave, but eventually they did. So anything is possible right now. I've seen a lot of players come and go, and I think Max Crosby is willing to stay with the Raiders. But like I said, his patience is wearing thin. If the Raiders mess up this offseason, if we hire the wrong head coach again, if we can't figure out the quarterback position, or if we end up going through another rebuild, that's when things could get really scary. I wouldn't completely rule out Max Crosby demanding a trade if the situation doesn't improve. So, the next few months are going to be both interesting and nerve-wracking for the Raiders. There could be a lot of turnover on the roster, especially if Antonio Pierce is fired. If that happens, it's likely Patrick Graham could be out too. A lot of coaches and players might be gone next season, and there will be a lot of moving parts. Another big issue is going to be the Max Crosby contract situation. It's going to be tricky, especially since this has been a down year for Crosby by his standards. He only has 45 tackles and 7.5 sacks, which is far less than last season, where he posted double those numbers. Plus, this is the first year he's had to deal with a serious injury, with ankle surgery cutting his season short. So this offseason is going to be a big one. And Raider Nation, I'd love to know what you think about the Antonio Pierce situation and the Max Crosby situation in the comments below. If you're new to the channel and love Raider-related content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.